Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
This is Bloomberg Businessweek. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine, plus global business, finance, and tech news. The Bloomberg Businessweek podcast with Massar and Tim Stenovec from Bloomberg Radio.
Safe to say we are living in a world full of superlatives. Pick your topic, right? It feels like our Bloomberg team noting in what will go down as the most spectacular IT failure that the world has ever seen, a botched software update from cybersecurity firm CrowdStrike Holdings, crashing countless Microsoft Windows computer systems globally. It's important to note, right, David, this wasn't a cyber hack.
Not a cyber hack as we understand it, and this was just part of a routine fix, but this is clearly something that was so pervasive in so many computer systems around the world that it had major effects. Microsoft and CrowdStrike rolling out fixes. Systems are being restored, but for several hours, bankers in Hong Kong, doctors in the UK, emergency responders in New Hampshire, all over the place, finding themselves locked out of programs that are critical to keeping their operations afloat. Here is CrowdStrike co-CEO George Kurtz earlier today on NBC News.
The system was sent an update, and that update had a software bug in it and caused an issue with the Microsoft operating system. And we identified this very quickly and remediated the issue. And as systems come back online, as they're rebooted, they're coming up and they're working. And now we are working with each and every customer to make sure that we can bring them back online.
For more on what happened and what's happening next, we're joined now by Bloomberg Intelligence Senior Tech Industry Analyst Mandeep Singh, who's here in our studio in New York, along with Bloomberg News cybersecurity reporter Jamie Tarabay, who's in our Washington, D.C. bureau. Mandeep, let me start with you. The co-CEO there saying this process is underway. How long is it going to take? And we were marveling at sort of how it affected so many parts of the economy. How widespread was this, and how bad could it have been?
Yeah, I mean, look, the good thing, as you noted rightly, is it's not a cyber attack. The last thing a cyber security company wants is a cyber attack on their own system. So that's not the case. But clearly, the impact is wide-reaching simply because the number of endpoints, the networks, if you take that into account, and I know the CEO said we have rolled back the changes. It requires a lot of manual steps. Even though they have rolled back the code or the content changes they made to their software, but that doesn't fix the issue. Otherwise, the systems would have been all up by now. We know they're not. So the reason why this will linger on for a bit, and God knows if it's going to be weeks or months, but clearly there are manual fixes to be done. And you have to remember, not all of the Windows environments are at the same operating system. They're different, running different versions. Some of them are very old. How do you fix that? Because I think the fix or the software update that they did impacted the different versions in a different way.
Interesting.
Mandeep, how did this happen? Why did this happen? I mean, Microsoft knows what they're doing, right? You roll out something, CrowdStrike knows what they're doing. How did this happen?
I mean, it's a big, I think, failure in terms of the testing procedures that these companies have to carry out before rolling out their code changes. And the CEO said it wasn't a code change, it was a content file change. So basically a configuration change that runs at the operating system layer. Otherwise, how do you bring down an entire system if it's not at the operating system level? And it also puts into question the single point of failure aspect, because all these companies invest in back-end systems, in replicating, backup environments that should come online if something like this were to happen. But that apparently didn't happen, and everything went down at the same time.
Jamie, for the uninitiated, how does this kind of software work? We talked about sort of the scale of this, how many companies are using it, but what is the kind of security software that CrowdStrike has pioneered? And I've been thinking a lot just about kind of the psychological ramifications of this, that people are now going to have fear there's going to be this kind of instability in our connected world.
It's a really interesting question, and I think it really does speak to the interconnectedness of all of the technology and all the systems that we have today. I think that what CrowdStrike does is, because it provides endpoint security protection, it has to have access to your system, and that's where sort of the compromise of the Microsoft system came into play. And look, it's not a good day for the cybersecurity industry. It's something that everyone is. They're concerned about it because it is a real question about, well, how, as Mandeep said, testing before you put it out there. But while it isn't actually a cybersecurity incident, we do hear and we are hearing from people that this is a perfect opportunity for a lot of people to take advantage of those systems being down to get in there and try to attack systems in some way. So the vulnerability right now is it's there, and there are people who would be using this as an opportunity to take advantage of that.
It makes me wonder, though, as we talk so much about generative AI and increasingly more data out there and more data maybe up in the cloud or some of it on premise. But I do wonder, Mandeep, I mean, is this just the beginning of probably similar system failures?
I think, again, it's hard to extrapolate. We are going to see attacks like this because clearly if it wasn't for an operating system level outage, we wouldn't be talking about this, and the magnitude of it wouldn't be this big. The reason why this had a far-reaching impact than a cyber attack would is because it touches the Windows operating system. So think of, Windows, Linux, and Apple having their own there are 3 operating systems that control all your devices.
Right.
Now, you can't roll out a fix. If your operating system is down and it needs to be rebooted, you can't do anything. There is no patchwork. And that's where, all the backup systems didn't work because there was no way to bring anything online. So that, I think, is a risk that companies need to think about. But I would say cyber attacks, we have had a lot of cyber attacks.
Right.
And look, there are data breaches, you have to pay fines. In this case, what I'm really interested in is who's liable. Is it Microsoft? Is it CrowdStrike? Who will pay the customers for the indemnification? I mean, clearly there was loss. Yeah. I think CrowdStrike probably has to take a lot of the blame, but clearly Microsoft. And look, these are the 2 biggest endpoint security companies. CrowdStrike actually competes with Microsoft in that space. So even though it was on Microsoft's system, they can say, oh, we will bundle our security solution. And if that was the case, we wouldn't be in this situation.
So David, you ready to put all your medical information out there?
I was going to say, we saw this play out in medical offices and hospitals as well. But Jamie, we're using this term endpoint, and I want to ask you a bit about that. Mandeep talking about sort of how companies are processing this and dealing with this. I mean, companies have had to allow access to their systems, this company to have access to their systems. Does this change that calculus at all? I mean, I think of the days when I bought on CD-ROM the McAfee software and put it on my computer, and that was, I guess, protecting it from threats then, those many decades ago. But talk about just the level of comfort that companies have using or outsourcing security in this fashion, what this might do to that.
That's a really good point, and I think that a lot of the conversation now is about third-party vendors and third-party entities that you invite into your systems to protect them. And look, every time something like this happens, there is a moment of awareness, there's a moment of, oh, let's put in all these protections, let's put in all these guardrails, let's try to figure out how we can mitigate this. And then we go back down again. And it's ironic that you sort of mentioned your McAfee fixes. Right, because the last time this happened was with the McAfee bug, in 2010, and we did have this kind of level of outage across systems universally. So it kind of ebbs and flows, and look, we're at the point where we're seeing the government still exhibit a lot of frustration with people trying to impose minimum cybersecurity standards on a lot of their systems. This doesn't help at all in terms of giving people faith in the security systems that they're meant to be installing. But at the end of the day, look, this is going to make everyone hyper aware about what they're putting in and what they're sending in as updates. And I would like to think that this would actually give people a little more concern about, okay, before we launch this, are we sure? Are we double sure? Are we triple sure? Just because of just the sheer impact that we've seen, not just on CrowdStrike's bottom line, but just, as Mandeep said, across the planet.
Reminds me of my dad, who was an engineer, and so he had flashlights and backup. Redundancy was a big part of our family growing up.
Says a lot.
Doesn't it? Jordan Robertson, you are with us, cybersecurity reporter at Bloomberg News, joining us from London. Our teams in Asia, London, have been following this story as it impacted the globe. Jordan, where are we right now? What's the update? What can you add to this story at this, 2:11 p.m. Wall Street time on this Friday?
Yeah, it's been a wild day. The day starts with massive outages related to both Microsoft and CrowdStrike, and we've had to figure out kind of which ones are responsible for which. And as you say, what has turned out to be the case is that CrowdStrike kind of alone is responsible for this massive outage. And what we've learned today is that CrowdStrike has apologized for the incident. They've released kind of instructions for how to fix this problem, but those instructions call for manual fixes. People are going to have to go machine by machine to fix this problem, and it just highlights kind of the fragility and the vulnerability of the modern IT system, which is built on really just a few companies that you kind of have to trust and hope are doing the right things when it comes to deploying these patches responsibly.
Jordan, count me among those who thought that the blue screen of death was something from years past, that we weren't going to face that once again. But you talk about the steps that one has to take now to reboot manually to make this happen. Just play that out a little bit for me now. And Mandeep was talking about this a few minutes ago, just sort of what this process looks like and how long it's going to take. I'm sure that every chief technology officer is sending out that strongly worded memo telling the staff to do this immediately as quickly as possible. But what's your sense of how long this is going to take, and indeed, how hard it's going to be to get every employee at a company to do this? I mean, there are a lot of Windows machines, I imagine, at most major companies around the world.
Yes, someone remarked online today that this is the best malware of the year, and it was delivered by CrowdStrike. It has essentially the same effect as ransomware does. A lot of times when we write about ransomware cases, we'll talk about the recovery time will typically take several weeks to a month or maybe 2 months or longer. We're looking essentially at that for this incident, according to folks that we've been talking to. And the reason for that is simple. We work in kind of a remote work era now. Not everybody is in an office where they have their computers. And unfortunately, for these affected organizations, in order to implement this fix, you have to have a technician physically touch the computer and with administrative privileges, delete this one file, tiny little file, one file only, but they have to have a physical hands on the machine to delete that file. You can't do that remotely. So we've talked to organizations that are having their remote employees, FedEx their laptops in if it got broken, or servers and things like that. So that's why it's going to take so long. And this update it's simple. Once you get your hands on a machine, it might take 15, 20 minutes only to do that. But if you've got thousands of machines and you've got to do this for, you're going to prioritize your critical systems first, of course. Yeah. But to get through thousands of machines, that's what's going to take weeks or potentially longer.
It's not just Control-Alt-Delete, I guess. Okay. So Mandeep, so what's changed now in our world because of this?
Well, so from a stock perspective, I would say, CrowdStrike was a darling when it comes to the software companies. 20 times EV to sales, premium valuation. They couldn't do anything wrong, top line growth steady. I mean, the fact that it happened to them, I think there will be definitely a big brand hit that they will take from this. And look, people typically move
not
past
excusing them, but was it a case of them growing too fast or no? Or
No, they were doing everything right in terms of execution, but that just goes to show there is always idiosyncratic risk when it comes to these companies, and no matter how good you are, there are little things that can take you down. And in this case, everyone is saying, people will move past this outage and they'll forget it. I think the brand has taken a big hit, and I mean, if the longer it takes to restore the systems and come out of it, I think the bigger the damage will be. And don't forget the lawsuits. I think it's critical here to think about what kind of payouts they may have.
Don't forget the lawsuits. It's the mantra. Jamie, let me turn to you for everything. Right? Jamie, I'll turn to you. Sort of, what are you watching for here in the days and weeks to come as we sort of see this process play out?
We're looking for impact. We're looking to see how long it takes people to get back online, and also, obviously, anyone trying to take advantage of this opportunity is, as Jordan said, it's like the malware of the year, and it's going to be something to watch. There are massive reports about all kinds of compromises around the world and delays, and clearly, how long is it going to take to get everything back online? And just watching to see, the reaction in terms of the scrutiny about having these critical supply chains dependent on these tiny little pieces of software, and just what kind of comes from that and the risk involved in that.
Yeah, good point. Jordan, last 30, 40 seconds for you. It's been a long day for you as you head into the weekend and probably looking forward to getting some sleep. What's top of mind for you, next day, weekend, Monday story?
I think that, as I mentioned, lots of IT technicians are going to be trying to fix these machines throughout the weekend and then the coming weeks. I think the biggest question is going to be for CrowdStrike, whether they will, outline how this really bad little piece of software made it past their quality assurance program. Was there a quality assurance program? Did anybody look at this before it went out? That's going to be the next big question.
You guys rock. Thank you so
All three of you.
much.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Bloomberg Intelligence Senior Tech Industry Analyst Mandeep Singh, Bloomberg News Cybersecurity Reporter Jamie Tarabay, and Bloomberg News Cybersecurity Reporter Jordan Robertson. Everything you need to know about that was right there.
Watch for the reboots and the lawsuits is my main takeaway from that.
T-shirts, hats being made right now.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Businessweek podcast. Catch us live weekday afternoons from 2 to 5 p.m. Eastern. Listen on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Or watch us live on YouTube.
One other sector of the market that we've been watching closely today is the airline group. And I'm looking at the S&P 500 Supercomposite Airlines Sub-Industry Index. Was down almost 2%. Right now it's up about 0.9%. Around noon today, the FAA put out a post on X, David, that the global IT issue could continue to affect flights this weekend and that it's still working with airlines to kind of closely keep an eye on the issue.
This is airlines begin slowly resuming some operations following that widespread global software meltdown. Thousands of people delayed on canceled flights, likely to cascade through the systems for days, as the FAA said. Airline stocks as a whole down 1.9% earlier today. With more on this aspect of the global IT outage story, we welcome in longtime airline industry analyst Helane Becker, TD Cowen Managing Director and Senior Research Analyst. Let me just start big picture here. This is something I think it's safe to say the airlines must have been fearing, and just give us your perspective from your vantage of how disruptive and devastating this has been for airlines.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So it disrupted operations, as you noted, all day. And because there will be crews out of place and aircraft out of place, it'll probably cascade into Sunday. I would say Friday and Sunday are probably the worst 2 days to have issues because those tend to be the days when we see the most number of people flying, especially a summer Friday. So I know the airlines were offering waivers if you wanted to change your plans, but pragmatically, if you're going on vacation today, you kind of want to go.
That summer Friday. You're not going to forfeit the summer Friday. That's the whole point.
Yeah. So I guess, I'm hearing reports that airports are starting to get aircraft out. Airlines are getting aircraft out. Obviously with massive delays. So I would say before you go to the airport, check your flight status. But that said, they're going to do their best to get you where you want to go.
Do you anticipate any kind of financial impact, material impact here out of this? Excuse me. Yeah.
Yeah, no. So we're going to treat it as if it was a storm, sort of a winter weather event or a summer thunderstorm. And there will be, a little bit of an impact for sure, but we're early enough in the quarter that they'll be able to recover. And also, since almost 3 million people are traveling on Fridays and Sundays these days, if you're starting your vacation, you're going to still persevere. And if you're ending your vacation, you obviously have to come home. And same with a business trip. If you're ending a business trip, you have to come home. Not a lot of business trips start on Fridays.
Fair enough. The good ones.
That's right.
Not.
That's so true.
Helane, I was...
I was thinking that Farnborough starts Monday.
There you go.
A few trips that started on a Friday or Saturday.
I'm not going this year, but a lot of my friends were leaving tonight.
A few extra days in London. I was just in Atlanta, and while waiting for my plane, I looked over, and I love when there was a dot matrix printer at the gate, and I'm always so amazed at the longevity of the dot matrix printer, particularly in airports. But I bring this up to say, how old are these systems? How outmoded are these systems? If we're to step back and look at any kind of broader takeaways of what's happened here, does it say anything about how good this infrastructure is? We were talking earlier with Mandeep Singh just about how people are running all kinds of versions of Windows. I don't know if they're running Windows 95, but no one's on the same thing or the most modern thing. And I always feel that particularly acutely when I'm at the airport. It feels like the systems that a lot of these airlines are using are pretty outmoded.
Yeah, that's another good observation, actually, because Southwest was one of the least impacted airlines today. And as most people know, they have one of the oldest systems out there. So thinking about it over the years and you pointed out, I've been doing this a long time, airlines were early adopters of technology. And then because of all the issues they had and the bankruptcy filings in the last, now it's 2 decades ago, which is kind of shocking. But with all those issues, they weren't able to necessarily keep up. And they've spent the last 4 or 5 years, especially using the time in the pandemic to start upgrading their systems. And so I know that most of the airlines and a lot of the airports were caught out by it. But, in fairness to them, they're doing everything they can to push information to the customer. I think United is probably on the leading edge of this. They rolled out earlier this month the traffic, the weather app that they're using to show you, because it's sunny where you are and it's sunny where you're going, but there's thunderstorms in between. So they're pushing that to people's cell phones now. And they're doing their best to keep up and get ahead of technology. But to your point, some of the systems are just slow to be updated. The dot matrix printer being one of them.
Oh my God, I want a new headline on a story. Yeah. Well, the dot matrix printer aside, I mean, it's safe to say, though, increasingly, there is a lot of technology still, though, when it comes to the airline industry. Do you anticipate, Helane, that we're going to see more incidents like this, potentially?
Well, I'm hoping not, of course, but it seems like there are always issues that aren't necessarily their fault, that they're a victim. And they weren't the only ones, right? I mean, you guys have been talking about this all day. There have been other industries. Banking was very affected. I know when I logged on this morning, I didn't have any issues, but it was just an accident of timing. I was a little late this morning. So by the time I logged on, the issues had been resolved within our firm. But in general, I think the industry is going to continue to invest in technology, and they're going to use every tool available to try to keep their aircraft running on time, obviously a safe operation, and so on. And so will these incidences continue to occur? Of course, because it's not only airlines that are always affected, there are other industries. And as long as we all rely on so much technology, we're going to be exposed. So I don't think there's anything you can do about that. But when you think about the millions of flights that we have on a monthly basis, on an annual basis, the system is still working pretty well, and the industry is still investing. I think each of the big airlines probably invest close to $1 billion a year in technology, and then above and beyond what they invest in aircraft CapEx. Right. So I don't think that's going to change.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Hey, listen, thanks so much for carving out some time for us. Have a great weekend. Always good to check in with Helane Becker. She's Managing Director, Senior Research Analyst over at TD Cowen, joining us in New York City. I'm looking at airline stocks. David, they're actually, as a group, up about 1.1%.
Interesting. How about that? Treating it like a storm. I thought that's my big takeaway from that. Just seeing this as kind of an anomaly. Very cool.
I feel like things are just bouncing back so quickly.
Yeah.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Businessweek podcast. Listen live each weekday starting at 2 p.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. You can also listen live on Amazon Alexa from our flagship New York station. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
As we continue our coverage of the global IT outage, hey, listen, one other area that we were thinking about looking at, and it seemed to be impacted, was retail. There was a story in the Bloomberg. Starbucks online system order ahead on mobile apps appeared to be down this morning. So workers were having to actually take orders by hand, David.
Take orders by hand. Other reports mentioned grocery stores, retailers, fast food giants affected around the world. I think I saw in one Bloomberg News article at a hotel in Hong Kong, they were checking people in by hand, which...
Like,
I usually see at big corporate hotels.
How do you open doors?
How do you know what's, I think that's just to, digress a little bit. What gives me the most pause is just to think through, like, in our line of work and other lines of work, what would you have to do if you weren't able to get online or get access to your systems?
I always say this to my husband because increasingly, like, all of our systems are online, like turning on lights, turning on this, turning on that. And I'm like, what happens? Like, as things go down, like, kind of our world stops.
The Bloomberg performing without missing a beat. I
know.
just want to point out, I will say kind of shamelessly, but
no problems
no issues
here.
for us here. Yeah.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about what's going on in the retail world. Nikki Baird is with us. She's Vice President of Retail Innovation at the Retail Technology Solutions company, Aptos. They work with companies from Crocs, Kohan, to LL Bean and Michael Kors. Nikki joining us from Denver, Colorado. Nikki, good to have you here with David and myself. I was going to say Tim and myself, so sorry about that. I'm like a robot. David
Thanks
and myself. How are you?
Good. Definitely watching all the news roll in about the outage myself.
I am curious. You guys work with a wide swath of the retail group. What are you hearing from the retail world in regards to the outage?
Yeah, it's really been kind of all over the place. Like, from our perspective, it's been a very limited impact. And it's mostly up to kind of the configuration and the setup of our clients, the choices that they've made, as opposed to like our ability to deliver solutions. So, we definitely, with point of sale in particular, you really have to think about how you handle things when things go down, and whether you got to pull out the calculator and the notepad in order to figure things out. And so, we really have focused on that offline resiliency. Even if the store had that kind of trouble, we'd still be able to transact. That's a really important part of delivering point of sale solutions these days.
Nikki, I wonder what happens when you have an event like this to the trust that consumers have in the businesses that they're dealing with the retailers that they're transacting with. Do they take a pause? How do retailers kind of combat that? Acknowledging the fact that a lot of them are using this kind of third-party endpoint software to keep their systems secure. Of course, by doing that, acknowledging the fact that other companies are in their systems, making sure that those systems are secure. I imagine that there's a fine line to toe there for these companies.
Yeah, I think we see a lot from like the data breaches, for example, that companies take kind of an immediate hit. But when they kind of go through their rehab, their public rehab, then consumers come back. So whether that's fortunately or unfortunately, I'm not sure what to say about that, but consumers' memory tends to be pretty short. So unless it is repeated issues, or unless those issues are so egregious that, it wipes out everybody's bank account, it'll come back. I don't really think it has a huge long-term impact on consumers' trust, particularly of retailers who are taking their credit cards and making payments.
Hey, I do wonder too, Nikki, any of your systems, you guys at your company, that were impacted? No.
We had very, very limited impact. Yeah, I think we had a few customers who had some minor issues with some back office computers in stores themselves, but it wasn't from like our solutions and how they're delivered. It was really from their own use of the technologies that were impacted.
How are you guys, though? What are the discussions you're having at your company, though, because of what happened, and maybe thinking about the different strategies or protecting the solutions that you provide to make sure nothing like this happens in the future?
Yeah, we're very, very active. We have multiple people, and we have a critical response team to really jump on all of those things whenever something like that happens. I think, we definitely spend a lot of our time preaching on IT industry best practices. Don't auto update things. You might want to pause before you auto update, but it's hard with security because some of those things are so urgent that you almost do want to turn on the auto update. But when you do things like that, then if there's anything that goes wrong, then you aren't doing anything to stop it, and you've got to roll it all back. So we spend a lot of time really focusing on kind of IT best practices to help protect yourself from some of those automated things that happen as much as possible.
Nikki, I want to step back and just ask you sort of what's front of mind for retailers right now. We're in mid-July. The school year, sadly, is around the corner. I can't even believe that. I feel like I just got my kids out of school, and now we're talking about back to school. But how much is that kind of the marquee item on retailers' calendars right now? How much emphasis are they placing on that, and what does it mean for the sector more broadly?
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely important. We have some retailers that, normally there's, from a technology perspective, a holiday freeze, right? So starting in mid-October, maybe they won't have any changes that get rolled out to stores because they don't want to impact their ability to deliver on the holiday season. Well, we have some retailers that also do that same blackout period for back to school. It's that important to them, and they do not want anything that will impact that. So it's definitely become probably the second most critical holiday event for retailers, not to call it a holiday, because I'm sure kids don't think that, but it's on that level of holiday spending.
I don't know. My daughter kind of enjoyed all the back to school shopping. It felt like a holiday. It felt like Christmas, like 10 times over, to be quite honest with you. Hey, having said that, you have a great window into the retail group, which we know how important the consumer is to the economy. What would you say what are you hearing from most retailers, how things are going? Because we keep talking about how consumers are looking for value.
Yeah, I think that is definitely very much at play. For sure, the back to school spending really kicked off earlier than ever this year. And I think we saw that in consumer surveys as well. We're seeing it in the stores. Consumers are shopping early, but they're shopping early looking for those deals. So I think there's the whole Amazon Prime days and all of the retailers like Target and Macy's and Walmart who kind of piled on around that Prime week. They all are trying to take advantage of the fact that consumers are shopping earlier for back to school to kind of get in front of those deal seekers. But that said, I think most of them are really trying to cherry pick up front and then also trying to look for those deals as they get towards the end of the season, which for back to school is a little bit more challenging for retailers because it's not like there's one day like Christmas Day where you have a deadline and like if you don't hit this day, it's over. For back to school, it kind of spreads across the end of August, beginning of September, sometimes even as late as mid-September. So there are more opportunities, I think, for consumers to kind of spread that spend out a little bit if they need to.
Very quickly here, I wonder if you're seeing signs of any strain on consumers. And something we talk about so often is what the Fed's thinking and what it might do and sort of how its war on high inflation is affecting consumers. Are you seeing them strained, and are companies doing anything particularly interesting as a result?
Yeah, the promotions are back on deck for sure. We saw it earlier in the year with some of the restaurants, fast food, kind of bringing back their meal deals and things like that. And I think, my company focuses on apparel companies, very much so the fashion industry. And we've seen the same deal that you've got to be pretty targeted in your promotions, and you've definitely got to offer value in order to get customers. I think one of the things with back to school in particular is that it is a very unique store traffic opportunity. So as you mentioned, Carol, right, you want this to be a really great experience for your kid. You want to take them, you want to have them pick the backpack, you want them to be emotionally invested in the new school year. And that's a particular opportunity to take advantage of that traffic, both in the moment, but also to put together a really great experience that could lead to holiday spending down the road.
I'm just going to say, Nikki, what I wanted it to be is one store and not like a parade of stores.
You were going to pick that backpack. You were going to fill it and give it to her.
No, I have to have this one. No, this one's just fine. Nikki, thanks so much. Good to check in with you. Nikki Baird, she's Vice President of Retail Innovation over at Aptos.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Businessweek podcast. Catch us live weekday afternoons from 2 to 5 p.m. Eastern. Listen on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Or watch us live on YouTube.
You are listening and watching Bloomberg Businessweek. I'm Carol Massar. Tim Stenovec is off. With me is David Gura, and we've got about 18 minutes left in today's trading session, bouncing around off our lows of the session, but not too far off. And you've got most of the major industry groups in the S&P 500. Now, 9 out of 11 are lower in today's trade. So a lot going on. As we keep saying, I feel like a little bit of a broken record. I'm very happy it's Friday, getting ready for my glass of red wine. So let's get to it. Our drive to the close. Tracie McMillion is with us, head of Global Asset Allocation Strategy over at Wells Fargo Investment Institute, joining us from Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Tracie, there is so much that we could, start with, whether it's the presidential race, whether it's the global IT outage, whether it's earnings, Fed policy. What matters most to you right now on this Friday afternoon?
You're right, Carol. There is a lot going on right now. And I think for us, the most important thing is to continue to advise investors to look at their portfolios and those stocks that have outperformed the most so far this year. And that's going to be stocks in information technology, communication services. Take gains there and reallocate into those sectors that should benefit as due to the earnings recovery as that continues through the end of the year. So those are sectors like industrials, energy, materials, healthcare, and financials.
You mentioned information technology. We were talking about NVIDIA, kind of recent rough road that it's been on. Something that's always of endless curiosity to me is when that enthusiasm for AI moves to smaller companies in the space, and we see kind of secondary and tertiary effects of that. Are you seeing that when you make those recommendations? Are you suggesting any of that money go into other AI companies, or are you really kind of making a more, counseling a more defensive play?
Yeah, so you're right. AI has certainly driven a lot of the returns so far this year, and it's been the mega cap AI companies. And as AI continues to proliferate and the build out continues, we think that the benefits to investors will move from that direct investment in technology names to peripheral types of sectors that should benefit as data centers are built out, as energy uses, electrification, continues to be needed. So we do think that that's kind of the next play, and that's where we're asking investors to focus their assets.
Having said that, Tesla reports next week, Alphabet reports next week. So if we get, I'm thinking about Alphabet in particular, some upbeat numbers from Alphabet, do you rethink kind of that big tech story? Because I feel like just when everybody says we're done with big tech, all of a sudden something happens and we all go roaring, or you see investors moving a lot of money back into the sector. So I don't know, how do you balance that?
Yeah, so the way that we're playing that right now is to be neutral technology. And what that means for a U.S. large cap investor who is neutrally indexed, that's about 1/3 of their U.S. large cap exposure. So that's a lot of exposure to technology. We just wouldn't be overweighted here. And because these stocks have done so well, that's exactly what we're seeing in a lot of portfolios, is that it's more heavily weighted than the index. So that's where we're saying pair some of the holdings, pair some gains, and reallocate to other areas. Not that we don't see technology continuing to perform well. It's just that there's a lot of risk there when the performance gets as concentrated as it's been so far this year.
Tracie, Carol started off asking you sort of what's top of mind for you. Let me turn that question on its head. And what's top of mind for your clients when they come in to you worrying about what they should be doing, curious what you would advise them to do? By and large, what are they asking about? What are they saying? And sort of how often do you have to set them straight? Sort of what's the most common kind of misconception that investors, that your clients have right now?
I'd say right now it's probably wanting to reallocate based on the political environment, wanting to reallocate based on who is leading in the polls. And we are telling investors that they should not make significant changes to their portfolios based on what is happening right now in the polls, that it's much too soon to make any changes to the portfolio. We've certainly seen some very extraordinary headlines coming out of this race so far. Lots of twists and turns. It's a long way to November. We just think it's speculative at this point to be investing based on what might happen at that time.
Tracie, is there a point though in the race, I don't know, 2 weeks out, a month out, like where you really look at the polls and you say, all right, guys, it's, hey, clients, it is time to make some adjustments?
So we probably would want to wait until we get more confirmation about, who's at the top, at the, who is the presidential candidate who has been elected. And then we'd want to see how Congress also has shaped up after the election. So it's really the total picture that may help us to direct clients to certain sectors, certain industries that might benefit more based on what policies are likely to come to fruition.
Just have a couple seconds left here. I wonder, when you look at the wide swath of economic data, what's most important for you as you kind of game out what the Fed might do, sort of where things are headed? What do you pay closest attention to?
Yeah, we're really paying closest attention to three things. There are three things that we think have been supporting these markets, and two of the supports are starting to weaken. One is the labor market that has started to weaken. Financial liquidity is also less ample. And then the third thing is inflation. And with inflation falling, that we think leads to better purchasing power for investors, lower rates, better credit availability. And that scenario to us tells us that we're probably going to see a shallow decline in growth, followed by a reacceleration next year.
Interesting, right? So touch and go, it feels like.
Yes.
Tracie McMillion over at Wells Fargo Investment Institute, thank you so much.
This is the Bloomberg Businessweek podcast, available on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Listen live weekday afternoons from 2 to 5 p.m. Eastern on Bloomberg.com, the iHeartRadio app, TuneIn, and the Bloomberg Business app. You can also watch us live every weekday on YouTube and always on the Bloomberg Terminal.